Hey, it's Mike again, here with the Mark 1 in the Origin series based on the Mark 1 tone bender. The Mark 1 is kind of the first in the Origin series that I had the idea to make. It's really the pedal and the circuit I've connected with the most as a player, and the one I wanted to kind of perfect. I've played so many of them over the years, and I love them all, but they all have a different thing, and I just wanted a very particular sound, and so I've been kind of working on Mark 1s the last 4 or 5 years, and just kind of dialing in what I like about them and dialing out what I don't like about them. So the Origin series Mark 1 is kind of the culmination of all of that. Plus, I've never really done an official release of a Mark 1 tone bender. I've done Mark 1 in the Descry, and it's kind of its own thing. You can get some Mark 1 tones with it, and it's still probably my favorite pedal, but it's a little bit different from just a straight ahead Mark 1. So I did want to include that in its own release, but after developing that in my mind, I was immediately like, I could make more pedals like this. Zonk, for instance, is the same circuit, different values, different tuning, but I could use the same form factor. And then it kind of developed into Buzzface, Mark 1.5, etc., etc., and more to come. First got to get through a bunch of these builds, but I have some more ideas for Origin series pedals this year. But we'll go through the Mark 1, we'll go through some sounds with a couple different guitars, and I will talk about the circuit a little bit as well first. So the Mark 1, it's got level and attack controls, in out, 9-volt LED, kind of modern format, 125B enclosure, so it's not too dissimilar to a lot of things, but inside it's just a straight up Mark 1 tone bender with the true bypass switching, and your power. It's also got a battery snap inside. So the circuit board is somewhat unique. I've seen a couple things like this before, but something I've been wanting to do, and I did on the Zonk as well, where it's got the original Mark 1 layout, and that's all done point to point with these eyelets. But it's also got sort of pinouts for the pots, the LED, and the ins and outs and power are all done with PCB traces. Keeps the noise down, makes everything, I can get it a lot more compact, and but it still has all the vibe of an old fuzz pedal with chunky parts inside, and the point-to-point wiring and all that, but also still very clean as far as the layout and everything and the wires. And so we'll talk a little bit about the circuit. Mark 1 has 3 gain stages. The first stage is a buffer circuit, and it's kind of a low fidelity buffer compared to anything modern, but it filters out a little bit of low end through this input cap, and then germanium buffer stage. There's a couple of bias resistors here that set the bias of this guy, and then it'll go through this coupling cap into the gain stage. So this cap is very large, lets everything through, and helps keep the gain up in this section. A couple of resistors here, and this resistor, which is attached to the attack pot, set the bias. And so when you're turning the attack knob, you're kind of you're changing the bias of the transistor, and I tried to get them in a really particular range so that they all sound similar, at least with the same transistor types. It should sound really close unit to unit, but with the old transistors it can sound very different, and sometimes that's deliberate. Sometimes people want it tuned a certain way, and you can adjust things around with that. So like on this one, this is an MP21, AC125, MP42, and I chose those based on kind of balancing each gain stage for EQ and gain range. This is generally in Q2 where most of the clipping is happening, and that's achieved again with the attack pot lowering the voltage. And on the solo one, this is the solo tune version, they'll go down to a certain point, and it's a little bit lower than probably most, so it still has a pretty good range of sweet spots of compression and of sustain and everything, but the system versions go way farther with a much higher gain transistor in this spot. So overall it's a little bit more of a fuzzy kind of effect, where I think this could be used in a lot of places where like a distortion box is used, with just a lot more character. So out of this gain stage, through another coupling cap, and into Q3. This stage I find is kind of more like boosting and EQ and kind of like a makeup gain stage to make everything loud enough. It actually makes everything very loud, and as it goes out of the transistor through this cap, there's a resistor on the output, and this is really the only other spot other than this bias resistor that I changed the circuit. So it's got a much smaller value, and so a lot more signal is going out to the volume pot. It does a couple things. It changes overall the tone a little bit. So on a stock Mark 1, you'll find the output impedance is it kind of darkens the sound a little bit, and it can be really affected by buffered pedals, or even just like a delay that's turned on, or reverb that's turned on, or some overdrives, boost pedals, anything like that, where they can increase the impedance. This is a very low impedance output, so it has the effect of making the pedal brighter with something else on after it. So what I typically do on these is lower that considerably. It's still lower impedance than ideal, but I didn't want to change the sound completely. I just wanted a little more output and a little more consistency when you have another effect on after it. So it's a little more than half the stock value. So you get a little more output and just more consistency there. The other resistor here, this is just for the LED. Same as on the Zonk. It's just making sure this doesn't fry when you turn the pedal on and the LED turns on. But point to point, and still, like I said, the same layout as a stock Mark 1, but shrunk down quite a bit from my old ones to fit in the box. Should still be able to use a bunch of different parts, but most of them will look probably like this because I have a lot of these components in stock and a lot of the same transistors in stock. The system one will have a little bit different transistor setup. This is just for the standard transistors, and that's what will be going out to dealers as well, but we'll do an upgrade version, and quite a few people have ordered the upgrade version. The price on the upgrade is, it depends, and by upgrade I just mean the transistor. So here's a British transistor version of the Zonk. So it's got an OC41, an AC113, and a CV, I think it's 7353. So those were all sort of 70s, 60s made British transistors, and quite a bit harder to spec them for each model. Or for each pedal. They're all over the place when it comes to gain and leak, and it takes a lot more time and a lot more transistors to sort through to find the right one to dial it in perfectly. So it costs a little bit more. I tend to also, on these, I'll do like a little bit, this has like an old carbon comp resistor, carbon comp resistors, and just a little bit fancier caps on the input and output. This is actually the same, and this is the same. I have a lot of these, but I really like these. They fall in spec really well. They sound really good. But the transistors, yeah, I'll offer that. It's going to be as long as I can anyway. You can see on the website, it's pretty much $25 per transistor to do the upgrade. I won't offer these for the shops. All the shops and dealers and everybody will get the standard transistors. I really like how the standard transistors sound. Maybe better sometimes. They're really consistent, and they're not noisy, and I have good luck tuning them. A lot of times it can be luck when you pull it out of a pile and you get some that are very noisy, and you have to not always throw them away, but you can't really use them for that spot anymore. A lot of these, especially some of these old black glass transistors, can be very noisy in Q1, for instance. So for a Mark 1, where originally it would have had like a OC75 or an OC71, they're just hard to spec there anymore because a lot of what we have left is very noisy. So accommodations were made. This is killer sounding Mark 1 tone bender. I have one and I love it. It's probably my favorite one, and it just has standard transistors. The solar version is my favorite, but the system one is really fun too. I'll try to do another video that kind of will go over the differences between Sola and system a little more in depth. But right now we'll just listen to the Sola version. I'll plug in the Telecaster first for single coils, and then I've got a Strat with humbuckers that has a PAF and a Firebird neck pickup, a PAF bridge. I'll plug in the Strat or the Tele first, and then Strat, and you can kind of hear how it responds differently to different pickups. And I'll turn the knobs and everything so you can get an idea of the differences on both the attack and the level control. And the attack control will kind of start with nothing at first, very gated, and then it very quickly turns on to pretty much full blast fuzz, and then as you turn it up, it gets more and more compressed and more sustained and a little more pinched attack. The level control, because it's louder than a stock Mark 1, about 9 to 10 is unity. It depends on what guitar, what amp, but typically that's about right for unity gain. But then you can push it farther and it will compress more, and turn it down a little bit and it will kind of tighten up more. Plug it in. As far as power goes, on all my pedals, they'll just have a center negative power jack, but it has to be isolated. Right now this is hooked up to just a one spot by itself, but if you're using a power supply, you just have to make sure that it's isolated. You can use a battery with it. Some effects like a fuzz face really sound different depending on whether or not you're using a battery or a power supply, or different kind of power supplies or different batteries. They can impart a very different sound, but I think the Mark 1 and Zonk, I think they both are best at 9 volts, and like if you can keep it consistent with the power supply, I think they sound their best. But everybody's different. It sounds a little warmer with anything less than 9 volts, so if you would prefer it warmer, you could run a little bit of a dead battery, or if you've got a power supply that can turn the voltage down, then you could use that. And kind of change the response a little bit. So plug it in with the Telecaster first. And I'll do bridge, and I'm going to adjust the tone control on my guitar. So as you roll that back, it will reduce the sort of high-end sizzle, and it will also focus the mid-range. And then I'll flip it to the neck pickup, do the same thing, and then middle and do the same thing. And then I think I'll try to play with the volume knob as well a little bit, just to give you an idea. It doesn't really clean up, but it does something interesting. It kind of gets crumbly and textured as you turn the volume down. It does clean up, but it's not like a fuzz face cleanup. But here, let's plug it in and see what it sounds like. So that was Telecaster. You could hear, I hope, the range on the attack and the range on the level. Yeah, it'll be a little different as far as the sweet spots go on the humbucker guitar. So I'll plug that in now, and then we can listen to that. One sec. And I'll do the same thing. I'll adjust the volume and tone on the guitar. I'll roll the tone back. I think that kind of, for me, that does the most interesting things, is adjusting the tone on my guitar. Adjusting the volume is kind of fun for, like I said, that sort of broken texture, but the way that I tune them, the way that I like the Mark 1s, tends to be a little more gated and less open. Although you can hear it's not full stop gated. It just has a lot of that sort of texture under your fingers as you attack the strings. So let's listen to this one. So hopefully you can hear the differences and some of the sweeps on the attack and the level control. Doesn't really need to be, the level control doesn't really need to be that high because it's quite a bit louder than a stock Mark 1, but you could push it all the way and it just gets very loud and starts to push your amp past about noon or so, pretty hard. It'll sound different into different amps and with different guitars, but the great thing I think is even though it's not a transparent sound by any means, it still lets the guitar and the amp shine and do their thing, and keeps the attack and feel and everything of the guitar really well, rather than kind of homogenizing it into a sound kind of like a big muff might do. But anyway, that's the Mark 1. If you have any questions or if you want to see anything specific, you know, shootout or anything like that, I have the Scry I could do a little shootout between, or you know, compare, contrast, or you can do the Zonk, compare and contrast. I could probably even do like you know, old transistor upgrade, British transistor upgrade versus the standard. I think you'll find the least amount of difference between that, where something like these two pedals are very different. The EQ is different, and the feel is a little bit different. The Zonk and the Mark 1 also very different, but all similar families that they live in. But leave me a comment below what you want to see. I'll try to do some more. I'll do another video on the Bend, and I've got to do one on the Master, the Range Master as well. But let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Bye.